The restaurant was a symphony of clinking glasses and hushed, important conversations, but at our table, the silence was deafening. It was my 30th birthday, and I was sitting opposite the two people who were supposed to love me most, my husband, Alex, and his mother, Carol. The air between us was thick with things unsaid, a tension so palpable I could almost taste it, bitter and metallic, beneath the flavor of the expensive wine. Alex raised his glass, a practiced, charming smile plastered on his face. The smile never reached his eyes. They were cold, calculating, already looking past me toward some future prize. "To my beautiful wife, Nina," he said, his voice loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. "May this year bring you everything you deserve." I met his toast with a small, polite smile of my own, the one I had perfected over 3 years of marriage. It was the smile of a woman who knew she was being played, but whose time to fold had not yet come. I took a sip of wine, the deep red liquid a stark contrast to the pale, lifeless meal in front of me. "And my gift," he said, pushing a small, long box across the table. I opened it. Inside, nestled on a bed of cheap, flimsy velvet, was a silver-plated bracelet with tiny, fake diamonds. It was the kind of thoughtless, last-minute gift you buy at a department store when you've forgotten the occasion. It was an insult disguised as a present. "Oh, Alex," I said, my voice carefully modulated to sound breathy and impressed. "It's lovely." I held it up to the candlelight, letting the fake gems catch the light, feigning admiration. I knew he wasn't watching my face. He was watching for my reaction, cataloging it, confirming that I was still the simple, easily pleased woman he thought he had married. My eyes drifted to the reflection in my water glass. It was a distorted, fishbowl view of our table, but it was clear enough. As I pretended to struggle with the bracelet's clasp, I saw Alex lean in close to his mother. He thought I was distracted. He thought I was a fool. His whisper was a low, conspiratorial hiss, but in the strange acoustics of the room, the words carried to me as clearly as if he had shouted them. "I'll keep her busy with dessert. You go change the locks at her house. The locksmith is waiting." Carol's head gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. A flicker of triumph, cold and sharp, crossed her face. "My house." She still called it her house, as if my parents hadn't left it to me. As if my name wasn't the only one on the deed. The bracelet felt cold and heavy in my hand. I felt a chill spread through my chest, but I did not let it show on my face. Carol gathered her purse, her movements smooth and rehearsed. "Darling," she said to me, her voice dripping with fake sympathy, "I'm so sorry, but a sudden migraine has just come on. I must go lie down. Happy birthday." She didn't wait for a reply. She turned and walked away, her heels clicking purposefully on the marble floor, a soldier leaving to carry out her orders. For the next hour, Alex played the part of the doting husband. He ordered me the most decadent chocolate lava cake on the menu, and then proceeded to talk about himself, his work, his brilliant new ideas. It was a monologue of magnificent boredom, designed to do exactly what he'd promised: keep me busy. I nodded and smiled, asking just enough questions to keep him talking, my mind a million miles away, counting down the minutes. He was in the middle of a long, boring story about a golf game when I saw her. Carol. She burst back into the restaurant, a whirlwind of panic. Her carefully styled hair was a mess, her face was as white as a sheet, and her lipstick was smeared. She stumbled through the tables, ignoring the annoyed glances from other diners. She didn't even look at me. Her eyes, wide with a terror I had never seen before, were locked on her son. She grabbed his arm, her manicured nails digging into the fabric of his expensive suit jacket. "Something happened," she whispered, her voice a frantic, shaking rasp. Her whole body was trembling. "We need to go. Now." Alex, annoyed at the interruption, tried to shrug her off. "Mother, calm down. What are you talking about?" She leaned closer, her voice dropping even lower, but the fear in it was a shout. "Your wife!" she choked out, her gaze finally flicking to me for a split second, full of a new, horrifying kind of respect. "The house. You don't understand." The house was more than just bricks and mortar. It was the last piece of my parents I had left. It was my childhood, captured in the faint pencil marks on a doorframe measuring my height, in the worn spot on the living room rug where my father always sat, in the smell of my mother's rose bushes that still bloomed every summer. They had left it to me, and only me, in their will, a final protective embrace. It was my sanctuary, my fortress. To Alex and Carol, it was just real estate. From the moment Alex had slipped the ring on my finger, their campaign had begun. It started subtly. "Nina, darling," Carol would say, running a finger over a piece of my mother's antique furniture. "This is all a bit dated, isn't it? A modern touch would do wonders for the property value." Property value. She never called it a home. Alex's approach was different, masked in his signature charm. "Honey, this place is huge just for us," he'd say, draping an arm around my shoulders as we stood in the garden. "We could fix it up, sell it, and buy a sleek new penthouse downtown. Imagine the parties we could throw." He spoke of a life I didn't want, in a home I didn't know, as if the memories etched into the walls of my house were worthless. As time went on, their suggestions became more insistent. The turning point was about a year into our marriage. "You know, for legal reasons, for security, you should really add my name to the deed," Alex said one evening, his tone casual, as if he were suggesting we order takeout. "It just makes sense. What if something happened to you?" "Nothing is going to happen to me, Alex," I replied, my voice tighter than I intended. "Don't be so dramatic, Nina," Carol chimed in from her armchair, not even looking up from her magazine. "It's just a piece of paper. It's what a normal, loving wife would do." Normal. Loving. The words were designed to make me feel small, selfish, but I held firm. My parents had been clear. The house was mine. It was my protection, my independence. I knew with a certainty that settled deep in my bones that the moment his name was on that deed, it would no longer be my home. The final ugly confrontation had happened 3 months ago. Alex had been trying to launch a new business venture, a vague, high-risk tech startup with some friends. I knew it was a bad idea, but he wouldn't listen. He came to me one night, his face flushed with a mixture of excitement and frustration. "I need you to do something for me," he said, avoiding my eyes. "The bank needs more collateral for the startup loan. They need the house." I stared at him. "No, Alex. Absolutely not." His face darkened instantly. The charming facade crumbled away, revealing the ugly, grasping greed beneath. "What do you mean, no?" he snarled. "It's my future. It's our future. Do you not trust me, after everything I do for you?" "Everything you do for me?" I shot back, my own anger finally boiling over. "This house, this life, it's all from my parents. You came into this with nothing but a mountain of debt you conveniently forgot to mention until after we were married." He recoiled as if I'd slapped him. Carol, who had been listening from the hallway, rushed in. "How dare you speak to him that way?" she shrieked, her face a mask of indignation. "He is your husband. You are a selfish, ungrateful little girl, sitting in your parents' house, hoarding it all for yourself." Hoarding. The word echoed in my ears long after they had stormed out of the house. They didn't see me as a wife, a partner. I was an obstacle. I was a dragon sitting on a treasure they believed was rightfully theirs. That night, crying in the home I was so desperate to protect, I realized they would never stop. They would wheedle, they would bully, they would lie, they would do whatever it took to get my house. And I realized I couldn't just keep saying no, I had to fight back. The next morning, I made a phone call, a call to a number I hadn't dialed in years, but one I had kept saved just in case. "Mr. Davies, please," I said to the receptionist. "This is Nina Thorne. It's about my parents' estate." Mr. Davies' office was exactly as I remembered it from when I was a child, accompanying my father on errands. It smelled of old books, strong tea, and integrity. He was a man from another era, with kind, shrewd eyes and a handshake as firm and reliable as an oak tree. He had been my father's best friend and his lawyer for 40 years. When he saw me, his face broke into a warm, sad smile. "Nina," he said, his voice a gentle rumble. "I was wondering when you'd call." I sat across from his large, imposing desk, the same desk where I had once colored in picture books while my dad talked business. But today, I wasn't a child. I was a woman with a problem. I told him everything. I told him about Alex's condescending charm, Carol's cold ambition, the constant pressure to sell the house, and the ugly fight over the startup loan. I didn't cry. My voice was steady, my words precise. I laid out the facts like a case study. When I finished, Mr. Davies leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled under his chin. He was silent for a long time, just watching me. "Your father was a brilliant man," he said finally. "But he was also a worrier. He worried about you. He made me promise I would always look out for you." He leaned forward, his expression turning serious. "These men, Nina, your husband and his type, they are garden-variety predators. They are greedy, they are arrogant, and they are almost always clumsy. The arrogant ones always leave a trail." And so our plan was born. It was not a plan of defense, but of attack. A counter-offensive. Mr. Davies said the best way to win a fight like this was not to block the punch, but to let your opponent swing, miss, and fall on his own face. We just had to give them the perfect opportunity to do so. We had to build a trap. My birthday became our deadline. It was the perfect cover, a day when their guard would be down, when they would be expecting me to be emotional and distracted. For the next 2 months, I began my secret project. I told Alex I was finally getting around to organizing my parents' old things. I spent hours in my home office, a room he rarely entered, surrounded by boxes of old photographs and letters. He was completely dismissive of the whole thing. "Honestly, Nina," he'd sigh, "when are you going to get over all that sentimental junk? It's not healthy to live in the past." He thought I was weeping over old love letters. In reality, I was on the phone with a forensic accountant Mr. Davies had hired. He thought I was sorting faded photographs. I was actually poring over bank statements and credit card bills, documents the accountant had legally obtained. The story they told was ugly. Alex wasn't just in debt, he was drowning in it. His business ventures were a series of failures, and he had been using my good credit to stay afloat, taking out cards in my name I didn't even know I had. The final, damning piece of the puzzle came from the accountant. He uncovered 2 recent failed loan applications made to shady online lenders. They were personal loans, with my house listed as the sole collateral, and at the bottom of the applications were the signatures. My signature, or rather a clumsy, obvious forgery of my signature. He had already tried to steal my house from under me. He had already committed a felony. With this evidence, our trap was complete. We had him, but Mr. Davies insisted we needed one more thing, proof of intent. We needed to catch them in the act of trying to take something from me. So I bought a prop, a beautiful vintage-style wooden lockbox. It looked old and important. I made a great show of it one evening when Alex was home, placing a few of my mother's old, worthless costume jewelry pieces inside. "Just sorting some of Mom's valuables," I said with a sigh, locking the box. "I feel so much better having them secure." I then hid the key in the most obvious place I could think of, a small decorative bowl on my dresser, right next to my own jewelry box. I knew Carol, who often came over unannounced when I wasn't home, wouldn't be able to resist. The bait was laid. All we had to do was wait for the rats to come sniffing. Carol walked out of the restaurant with the confident stride of a predator who had just been given the signal to attack. Her migraine was a pathetic lie, a flimsy excuse that she didn't even bother to make believable. She was on a mission, and in her mind, the victory was already assured. I knew every step she would take as if I were walking beside her. She would take a taxi straight to my house, her house, as she thought of it. The locksmith would be waiting on the curb. A man Alex had likely found on some disreputable online forum, paid in cash to ask no questions. Carol would stand there, arms crossed, tapping her foot impatiently as he worked, her face a mask of smug satisfaction. The sound of the drill biting into the old wood of my front door, the click of the tumblers being replaced, to her these would be the sounds of triumph. Once the new lock was in place, she would have paid the man and sent him on his way, eager to have a few precious moments alone in the house before I could possibly return. She would let herself in with her brand new key, a queen entering her newly conquered castle. The house would be quiet, a silent testament to her success. I knew exactly where she would go first. Not the living room, not the kitchen. She would go straight to my office. Alex would have told her about my secret project, about the sentimental junk I was sorting. He would have told her about the lockbox. She's probably got her mother's jewelry in there or old savings bonds, he would have speculated. Go see what's in it. Carol would find the lockbox easily, sitting on the corner of my desk, looking old and important. Her heart would beat a little faster. This was the prize. She wouldn't have to search for the key. She had stolen it from the little bowl on my dresser weeks ago, a petty theft she thought had gone completely unnoticed. It was the move of a common thief, clumsy and arrogant. She would slide the key into the lock, her hands trembling with greedy anticipation. It would turn smoothly, the lid would lift, but she would not find sparkling diamonds or dusty old stock certificates. She would find a single, neatly organized file folder. Her brow would furrow in confusion. She'd lift it out. It was thin, containing only a few sheets of paper. The first page would be a copy of a loan application. She would recognize the letterhead of a high-interest lender. She'd see the loan amount, a staggering $200,000. She would see the collateral listed, my house, with its full address. And then she would see the signature at the bottom, a clumsy forgery of my name. A cold knot of unease would begin to form in her stomach. This wasn't what she was expecting. She would flip to the second page. It was a printout from a forensic accountant, a neat summary of Alex's hidden debts, his failed businesses, and the trail of money he had siphoned from accounts I didn't even know we had. The numbers would be stark, undeniable. The final document would be a single sheet of stationery, the same kind I used for my thank you notes. It would be a letter, handwritten in my own cursive script, and it would be addressed to her. Carol. I knew you'd look in here. I knew you couldn't resist. Did you really think I was this stupid? Did you think I wouldn't notice the missing key, the hushed phone calls, the way you both look at my home as if it's already yours? You should have raised a better son. The man you think is a clever businessman is nothing but a cheap, desperate criminal, and you are his accomplice. Happy birthday to me. Nina. She would read it once, then twice, the words blurring in front of her eyes. The blood would drain from her face. The smug satisfaction would curdle into pure, gut-wrenching terror. The lockbox wasn't a treasure chest. It was a trap, and she had just walked straight into it, her greedy fingerprints all over the evidence. The quiet house would no longer feel like a castle. It would feel like a cage, and the walls would be closing in. I watched them from across the table, a silent observer at my own execution-turned-coronation. The panic was rolling off Carol in waves, a palpable, acrid scent of fear. Alex, ever the master of denial, was still trying to maintain control, hissing at his mother to keep her voice down, his eyes darting around the restaurant to see who was watching. He still thought this was a minor hiccup, a moment of her usual hysteria. He hadn't yet understood that the game was over. "Not here, Mother," he whispered fiercely, his hand clamped on her arm. "Get a hold of yourself." "What are you talking about?" Carol was beyond his control. She fumbled in her expensive handbag, her hands shaking so violently she could barely grasp the piece of paper she was looking for. She pulled it out. It was crumpled, creased from her panicked grip. She shoved it into his hand. From across the table I recognized it. It was the copy of the loan application, the one with my forged signature. "She knows, Alex," Carol choked out, her voice a strangled, desperate rasp. Her eyes flicked toward me, no longer filled with condescension, but with a new, terrifying respect. "She knows everything, the loans, the debt, all of it. She left this for me to find, in the lockbox. It was a trap, Alex. It was all a trap." Alex's smug, irritated expression dissolved as he stared at the document in his hand. His face went slack, the color draining from it until it was a pasty, sickly gray. He looked at the forged signature, then at the letterhead of the shady lender, then back at his mother's terrified face. The gears were turning in his mind, the pieces clicking into place with horrifying speed. The sentimental junk, my quiet evenings in the office, my sudden interest in my parents' old papers, it all coalesced into a single horrifying truth. This wasn't their plan. It had never been their plan. It had been mine. All along. He looked at me then. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The charming, confident man I had married was gone, replaced by a cornered, panicked boy. He finally saw me, not as his simple, naive wife, but as the architect of his ruin. He fumbled for his phone, his hands clumsy and slick with sweat. He was trying to call his lawyer, his fixer, the man he paid to clean up his messes. He stabbed at the screen with a trembling finger, his breath coming in short, ragged gasps. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my wine, the rich liquid cool and soothing. I let the silence stretch out, savoring the beautiful, exquisite panic on his face. When I finally spoke, my voice was quiet, calm, and clear as a bell. "I wouldn't bother," I said. He froze, his thumb hovering over the call button. "Your lawyer, Mr. Peterson?" I continued, swirling the wine in my glass. "He's a busy man. I believe he's in a meeting right now." I paused, letting the words hang in the air before delivering the final, devastating blow. "With my lawyer." The phone slipped from his nerveless fingers and clattered onto the table. The sound was like a gunshot in the suddenly silent space around us. He stared at me, his eyes wide with the full, complete understanding of his defeat. He had walked into a steel trap, and the jaws had just snapped shut. He had planned to change the locks on my house, but I had just changed the locks on his entire life. The check for our disastrous birthday dinner sat on the table between us, completely forgotten. It was clear that no one would be paying it. Without another word, Alex grabbed his hysterical mother by the arm and practically dragged her from the restaurant, leaving a wake of stunned silence and overturned water glasses behind them. They fled the restaurant like common criminals, a chaotic blur of panic and desperation. I knew where they were going. They were racing to the house, driven by the frantic, primal need to control the damage, to get their hands on the rest of the documents in that lockbox. They were clinging to the foolish hope that if they could just destroy the evidence, they could somehow undo what had been done. I took my time. I left a generous amount of cash on the table to cover the bill and the disruption, then calmly walked out into the cool night air. I didn't take a taxi. I walked the few blocks to where Mr. Davies was waiting for me in his large black sedan, parked discreetly under a street lamp. He opened the passenger door for me from the inside. "Is it done?" he asked, his voice calm and steady. "It's done," I replied, a slow smile spreading across my face. "They took the bait." He simply nodded and put the car in drive. We didn't speed. We drove at a respectable, law-abiding pace toward my house, my sanctuary, my fortress, my home. When we turned onto my street, we saw them. Alex's car was parked haphazardly, half on the curb, the driver's side door still hanging open. He and Carol were on the front porch, frantically working at the door. The new lock Carol had been so proud of, the symbol of her supposed victory, was now their prison gate. Alex was pulling at the handle with all his might, his face red with exertion and rage, while Carol fumbled with the new key, her hands shaking too much to fit it properly into the keyhole. Mr. Davies pulled his car smoothly into my driveway, the headlights washing over them, pinning them like startled animals. They froze, blinking in the sudden glare, their frantic energy dissolved into a stunned deer-in-the-headlights paralysis. The front porch light flickered on. The sound of a heavy-duty deadbolt being drawn back echoed in the quiet night. The front door opened, but it wasn't me who stepped out. It was a tall, uniformed police officer. He was calm, professional, and radiated an aura of absolute authority. He was followed by a second officer who stood just inside the doorway, his hand resting casually on his hip. "Alex Thorne?" the first officer asked, his voice polite but firm. Alex was speechless, his mouth agape. Sir, we've received a report of attempted breaking and entering at this address, the officer continued. We're also here regarding a formal complaint of fraud and identity theft filed against you. We're going to need you to stay right where you are. At that moment, Mr. Davies stepped out of the car. He walked onto the lawn, looking stern and imposing in his dark suit. Officers, he said, his voice booming with authority. Thank you for your prompt arrival. My name is Howard Davies. I am the attorney for the owner of this property. These two individuals are trespassing. As if on cue, I stepped out from behind Mr. Davies, moving from the shadows into the light of the porch. I stood on my lawn, my arms crossed, and looked at the two people who had tried to ruin me. Alex stared at me, his face a mess of confusion, fear, and disbelief. The locks have been changed, Alex, I said, my voice carrying clearly across the lawn. This is no longer your home. It never was. I walked toward the porch, stopping at the bottom of the steps. I looked up at him, at the man who had called me simple and sentimental. Those documents your mother found? I said, a cold smile on my lips. Those were just copies. A little birthday present from me to you. The originals, along with a mountain of other evidence, are already with the district attorney. Carol let out a small, strangled gasp. Alex looked as if he had been physically struck. The trap wasn't just the lockbox. The entire house had been a trap, and they had spent the last 3 years walking deeper and deeper into it. The game was over, and they had lost everything. The sight of the police officers, combined with the finality in my voice, shattered the last of Alex's fight. The rage and panic drained away, leaving behind the pathetic, pleading boy I had seen a glimpse of in the restaurant. His face crumpled, his shoulders slumped. He looked at me, his eyes wide with a desperation so profound it was almost pitiful. "Nina, please," he began, his voice cracking. "Don't do this. I'm sorry. I swear I'll fix it. It was a mistake. I was stupid." He took a step toward me, his hands outstretched in a gesture of supplication. The police officer on the porch subtly shifted his weight, a silent warning. Alex ignored him. His eyes were locked on me, his last and only hope. "I love you," he choked out, the words sounding hollow and rehearsed. "We can get through this. It was her idea." He jabbed a thumb toward his mother, who flinched as if he had struck her. "She pushed me into it. She never thought you were good enough for me, for us. She's the one who wanted the house." Carol stared at her son, her face a mask of shocked betrayal. The woman who had enabled his every whim, who had been his loyal co-conspirator, was now being thrown under the bus without a second thought. For the first time, she was seeing her son for the sniveling, spineless coward he truly was. Her expression hardened, the last vestiges of maternal love dissolving into cold, hard disgust. I listened to his pathetic excuses, his frantic blame-shifting, and I felt nothing. The space inside me that had once held love for him was now a quiet, empty room. I had mourned the end of our marriage months ago in the silent solitude of my home. This was just the paperwork. When he finally ran out of words, his pleas trailing off into ragged sobs, I didn't respond. I simply looked at Mr. Davies. He gave a slight nod, stepped forward, and addressed Alex in a tone reserved for delinquent children. "Mr. Thorne," he said, his voice cutting through the night air, "you have a choice. A one-time offer? On the table for the next 5 minutes." He opened his briefcase and pulled out a small stack of papers. Option 1. You sign this full and binding confession, detailing your attempts at fraud and forgery. You also sign these divorce papers, which include a clause waiving any and all current or future claims to any of Ms. Thorne's assets, including this property. In return for your full cooperation, Mr. Davies continued, my client has agreed to inform the district attorney of your compliance. It may or may not encourage a more lenient charge, perhaps reducing a felony to a misdemeanor. That will be up to them. He paused, letting the weight of the offer sink in. Option 2, he said, his voice hardening, is that you refuse, in which case Ms. Thorne will pursue the maximum possible criminal penalties for felony fraud, forgery, and identity theft. We will see you in court, and I assure you, you will lose." Alex stared at the papers as if they were a death sentence. He looked from the documents to my face, searching for any sign of weakness, any flicker of the gentle, forgiving Nina he thought he knew. He found none. My expression was a placid lake, calm and unmoving. He looked at his mother, a last, desperate appeal for guidance. She just shook her head slowly, her face etched with a disgust so profound it was startling. "Sign it, Alex," she whispered, her voice devoid of all warmth. "Just sign it." Defeated. Utterly and completely defeated. He stumbled over to the hood of Mr. Davies's car, took the pen that was offered, and with a trembling, broken hand, he scribbled his name. He signed away our marriage. He signed away his crimes. He signed away his future. Mr. Davies took the papers, checked the signatures, and placed them securely back in his briefcase. The police officers, having witnessed the entire exchange, escorted a now silent Alex and Carol to their car, instructing them to leave the property immediately. I stood on the lawn and watched them drive away, their taillights disappearing into the darkness. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel triumph. I felt quiet. I walked up the steps to my front door. My door. I stepped inside my house. My house. Alone, in the quiet hallway, I reached out and turned the heavy, solid deadbolt Mr. Davies had installed. The lock clicked into place with a loud, satisfying thud. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of my future. It was the sound of freedom.